Each year in my time at Berea College, I've been privileged to offer the meditation in the final chapel of the school year. This year is certainly different than any other we have experienced, so as I was reflecting on what I might share this year, I realized that there really wasn't any choice. In fact, whether it is in church or on the editorial page of a newspaper or on a cable news network or in faculty meeting, it seems that we are all thinking and talking about little else than COVID-19. I would call myself a thinking and believing Christian who happens to be a scientist, so I've decided to share some thoughts about pandemics and spirituality from that perspective. Plagues and pestilence have been a fearful part of life for people and societies over all the millennia of human experience, and so the topic comes up frequently in sacred texts. There one finds some repeated themes. As one example, our reading from Psalm 91 today references divine protection from the pestilence that walketh in darkness, and any plague that might come nigh thy dwelling. One spiritual perspective on pandemics is that they are one of the many evils in the world, one from which divine help is necessary for survival. A Christian would say further that such evils were not originally present in the world that God created, but rather came as a result of our sinful natures. There's a darker version of this theme, that being that plagues are actually sent by God in punishment for particular failings and evils displayed by individuals or societies. I've heard, for example, that some fundamentalist Christian preachers have identified COVID-19 as divine punishment on world societies for their grievous moral failures. Another example is from the Book of Mormon, where in the second book of Nephi, chapter 6, verse 15, one finds, "And they that believeth not in him," that is the Messiah, "shall be destroyed, both by fire and by tempest, and by earthquakes, and by bloodshed, and by pestilence, and by famine. And they shall know that the Lord is God, the Holy One of Israel." In that view of divine retribution, a displeased God has many weapons. Another perspective, one that is closer to how I prefer to think about pandemics, comes out of the tradition of awe and respect for two parts of created reality: the complexity and beauty of nature on one hand, and the ability and interest of the human mind to seek understanding of it on the other. My favorite biblical passages for this perspective are actually found in the book of Job, chapters 38 through 42, an amazing dialogue between God and Job in which God challenges Job to seek understanding of all of nature, from the constellations to the creatures that inhabit the earth. God doesn't get all the way to microbes, but that's probably only because Job would have had no idea what he was talking about if he had mentioned the coronavirus, which was around even then, causing early humans to get head colds. My reading of Scripture and my Christian beliefs inspire me to seek to understand the world and to respect the work of my fellow scientists. Science is not perfect, of course, and at any given point in the application of science to some part of the natural order, understanding is incomplete and provisional. Still, understanding based on science is almost always superior to that based on other presumed ways of knowing things. The preacher from Louisiana who resisted his governor's order to cease in-person Sunday services because he thought God was commanding him to offer the solace of Christian worship to his parishioners in their present anxiety, assumed God would protect them from COVID-19. He should actually have respected the science of epidemiology, and someone might have told him about the number of cases here in our own state that have been traced to a particular revival service in Western Kentucky. Yes, I do believe, along with the ancient Hebrews, that God will protect us from the scourge of a pandemic. But I believe that that protection is quite likely to come via attention to what scientists and doctors can tell us about the disease. And I have the same belief about many of those other supposed weapons of a jealous God. Earthquakes: build good buildings and don't locate them on faults. Bloodshed: don't put weapons in the hands of those who would misuse them. Tempest: go to the basement during tornado warnings and don't go for runs in thunderstorms. Fire: take good care of the earth so that climate change doesn't cause destructive wildfires, and on and on. I'll conclude with a story about a man who died in a flood. Heavy rain and flooding were predicted, and he was urged by local authorities to evacuate. He stayed, relying on God's protection. The floods did come, and the water was rising, so he went up to the second floor. A boat came along to rescue him from a window, but he declined, saying that God would protect him. The water continued to rise, and eventually he had to climb onto the roof. A helicopter came to rescue him, but again he declined. The water continued to rise, and he was swept away and drowned. When he arrived at heaven's gates, he expressed consternation to God that the assumed protection had not come. God's reply, "I sent the sheriff to your door. Then I sent a boat, and then I sent a helicopter. What more were you expecting?" God's protection for us in pandemics starts with listening to scientists and doctors. Thank you. Be safe and be well, and God's blessings on you all.